Geoff Coughlin, editor Scale Modelling Now. Here's another welcome release from Revell. It's the 48 scale Phantom FGR-2, and this will be known to many of you already. It's the original Hasegawa kit in 48 that's now been reboxed by Revell. No great surprises with that, but it's well worth a look just to see how has it stood up. Has it stood up well or otherwise? So we're going to check out these moulds in a second. So let's just pop the box out of the way and get straight into the kit. What's interesting, I think, firstly, is to just spot the recessed panel lines. They all look nice and crisp. Doesn't appear to be any flash anywhere, which is really impressive given, well, okay, maybe just a little bit. I just spotted there's a little bit here on the end of the wing centre section, the lower wing centre section there. Generally speaking, not too much. It'd be interesting to see whether all the panel lining is consistent across the surface. I'm sure when I built this kit a few years ago, it was showing it's aged a little bit in some places. So that's something just to bear in mind. You might find some of the panel line fading out in different places. But overall, this is a good kit. You know, it's accurate. It's a good representation of the real thing. And for goodness sake, it's a British Phantom, which is quite different to the American Phantoms, or other marks of Phantom, I should say. And so that of itself has to be welcomed. Both the FG1 and FGR2 were released, and both have been available subsequently at different times. So this is the FGR2, the RAF version. And so what have we got? Nice little touches, really. You've got some interesting sort of fabric effect here on one of the cockpit side panels. You've got some decent instrumentation, nice little touches. The optional tail cones, the parachute brake housings, which are different. You probably won't need these two. I think those are the mounts for the catapult launching wire. You've got separate sections here, the rear warning receiver options for the tails. So you can either have the standard tip, fin tip, or you can have the rear warning receiver, which is included in the kit. And then coming across to the cockpit main sections, you've got a decent enough tub, lovely raised detail. I think two decent representations of the Mark 7 Martin Baker ejector seat as well. I think those are very reasonable. And the pilots are not bad either. Pretty decent, to be honest. Couple of crew figures there. What else have we got? Decent enough wheel bay, a little bit shallow perhaps, but nothing to write home about. Certainly looks pretty good to me. Nice to have a couple of drop flap options there. And if we just come across to the right, you've got some really nicely moulded clear parts. Those are very good, good nick, look good, and no mould seam lines either on those, which is good. So we're moving on towards some of the stores. You've got the big centerline tank, you've got the two wing tanks, which are great. Mostly those are the ones that were carried in RAF service. You've got 4 Sparrows. I think that's probably the only thing that's a little bit light. You don't have AIM-9 sidewinders, from what I can see. It's a little bit of a shame. But then Hasegawa used to release separate weapons sets, which was quite common, which meant that, of course, you'd have to go out and buy those. But I'm sure you can source some winders from the spares box, perhaps, or one of the aftermarket outfits. Decent enough exhaust cans. And then coming across to the left-hand side, of course, you've got the Spey exhausts here, which are the ones you're going to need for this kit, not the ones you just saw, which were and are more appropriate for the American versions of the aircraft. But of course, this sprue here will be common, I'm sure, to, or was common to, a number of the Phantom kits released by Hasegawa. So here you've got the Brit version, you've got the SU-23A rotary cannon. That's a great feature on the British Phantoms. Got some really nice little petals on the inside there of the exhausts, which I think look very good. Got a recce pod underneath here. I think it's number 2 squadron carried those, plus maybe one or two other squadrons, and the stabilisers are on the back. So look, all in all, it's a decent enough kit. Always was a good kit, and certainly the parts look as if they're standing up pretty well, all in all. So what have we got decals wise? great decal sheet, packed with stencils and classic 56 squadron markings for, in fact, the one you see on the cover and the instruction booklet, and of course on the box, very famous XV470, which has got the sharp mouth and the greys and the red fin. So of course inevitably that's going to be quite an attractive option, of course, with a big sharp mouth. You've got an all blue machine, one, remember the two blue Phantoms, the 19 and 92 Squadron Phantoms. This is the 92 version, XV408. So that's an overall round all blue, which is a decent enough option there. Various stencils here for the gun pack and for the iPod. Some common stenciling as you'd expect to find, and then of course the appropriate low vis for the 56 Squadron, or the high vis for the camo version. Let's have a look at the instruction book. Classic Revell version. This, of course, as usual with the Revell mixes of paint in the front, but you might well want to source your own paints depending on your view of those. Classically into the cockpit, all very, very standard, straightforward stuff. This is not a complicated kit. It's very straightforward if out the box, and you might, of course, want to add some additions. Probably the primary addition is some wiring in the cockpit between the front and rear positions, rear seats. Definitely some canopy mirrors, you'll need those. But other than that, honestly, is there really very much to see? No, not really. So I think it's a really good, straightforward build. Got this, here we are, we've got the XV470, the 56 Squadron RF Wattisham 92 with that sharp mouth. You've got the Randall Blue 92 Squadron machine from RF Wildenroth in 1991, yeah. And then of course you've got the green and grey over light aircraft grey number 2 Squadron Larbrook, Germany 74 Recce Squadron there. One little thing I just noticed that Revell have done, you've got this classic sort of two-tone grey shown on the upper wings. That's always an interesting discussion point for me. I actually can't find any evidence that was ever applied, which might sound very controversial to some of you out there. So personally for me, I'd do an overall barley grey finish. I think that's more authentic. Yet nonetheless it does persist and appears on most instruction sheets and most painting guides. So that of course is a matter for you to decide what you're going to do with it. But overall, nice package this from Revell. Great to see this kit, the 48 scale Phantom, back in production again, and this time under the Revell label. So that's the 48 scale Revell Phantom FGR-2 from Revell.